Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Now in this essay I'd like to talk about how history books are being rewritten and to depict white society as being universally and without mitigation of any sort, universally evil, and pushing a propaganda narrative. Now to push this propaganda narrative, of course, facts have to be removed, accuracy has to be removed. Now, the various levels of, if you like, checks and balances that used to occur in getting books, written, getting agents to handle them, getting editors to touch them, getting book companies to look at them. You just had to go through quite a process, and I can speak from personal experience on this. I some years ago I wrote it was a history book, and it got a lot of scrutiny by people, at the book publishing company, and they picked up some I thought fairly minor errors that they wanted corrected. Quite minor things, but that didn't alter the characterization at all. But nonetheless, I was more than happy. Well, fine. It's very hard when you're writing a 130,000 word sort of book to you miss something, and so I was in many ways grateful that there was extra pairs of eyes that were looking at it, because I wanted a good quality work to go out into the public domain. So I was okay with that. But that's obviously not the case today. That all these checks and balances and people there correcting historical inaccuracies, particularly the case, of course, with historical books or books claiming to be about history, then those checks and balances seem to have gone. Now, something that's brought home to me is very recently. I had a book on the history of a certain country that was written in the 1950s, and very studious work, by the way, very scholarly work, factually accurate, very, very impartial, very non-emotional. There's very hard to find any emotional sort of type language being used. There's no language like he horrifically did this, or he stalked her menacingly. Using his whiteness to there's nothing like that, and it was all very, very. I wouldn't call it bland necessarily. It read quite well, but certainly it stuck to the facts and didn't try to emotionalize anything, and kept a very middle course, so that things were described as excessive if they were excessive. So anyway, that was from the 1950s. Now that history book's been updated. Now the reason I came across it was I belonged to like a book collectors club, I suppose you'd call it. They went out of business some years ago. Anyway, it's got a new owner, and so they started sending me emails again saying that hey, we're kind of back in business, and so some of the books they've still got records of the books I bought through them. And so they mentioned this history book that's now been updated only a year ago, I think it was. And so I had a look at it, or a look inside, as you can do. So I picked some sort of random pages, and I was shocked to see that it's not even the same fucking book anymore. The interpretation has been added, so that if say a white man went to do a map of the depths of a harbour, for example, so there's a bunch of white guys in a boat, and they're dropping the plumb line down to find where the bottom of this particular harbour is. And then recording those depths, and so doing a proper map, which is important for navigating if ships come in there. So So was that what they were doing? No, they weren't. These evil, like fucking racists were doing this, were taking over the harvest so they could exploit the poor brown people and to exploit them like Hitler. And so there were their state of mind was assumed or asserted. Whatever they did was assumed to be evil. And their intent was to be evil. Their sole purpose was to be evil. They were racist exploiters because they hated white people. And somebody from the town or the village that some of these white people came from had once killed a black guy. So that proves by association they're evil, murderous racists, and so on. So it's been heavily rewritten. And where the facts didn't suit the narrative they wanted to put of the white man being evil, then they would simply remove those facts. So the determination was, we're going to create a narrative here, and any facts that get in the way of the narrative, we'll simply remove them. We'll not mention them. Or we'll invent different facts, or we'll say that something happened on a different time or a different date or a different place. In order to maintain the narrative. The narrative must be anti-white. That is the sole purpose of the narrative. And whatever the motivation or the root cause of wanting to do an anti-white narrative, we can set that aside. But the decision to make an anti-narrative, an anti-white narrative is quite clear. It sticks out like a sore thumb. And again, if any facts get in the way, so they just simply take them out or omit them, just delete them. But this application of sinister intent and the sinister interpretations that are placed on everything that white people do. Now there were some things where the black people massacred some white people, many times on Homestead. That's all taken out. That's all gone. So the way this history book reads now is just an end-to-end. Beginning to end, rather, depiction of all these evil white people and the things they did, claiming that there was slavery when it wasn't, and all sorts of things that really just simply aren't true or not accurate. And so the intent to do this, the narrative, the anti-white narrative, is the only thing that comes across. Now again, if the intent to make white people look bad was if white people were bad, then you wouldn't need to take out the facts. You wouldn't need to eliminate the facts. You wouldn't need to use highly emotive language. You wouldn't need to infer or not infer, directly assert as a fact, assert evil intent. You wouldn't need to do any of those things if white people were evil. Their acts and so would speak for themselves. You wouldn't need to tell so many lies, and so we can tell from the amount of lies, the amount of untruth, the amount of removal of context, the amount of removal of facts. We can tell from that, just that alone, that this is all propaganda and has nothing to do with accuracy of facts or history. But it's afflicted the whole thing of history. So they've got this book club thing. They've got a list of history books, all recent publications, which includes things like the 1619 Project, and other hysterical activist propaganda. So you look at those, and so I went through those books and had a look at the authors, all of whom, every one of them is an activist. And then had a look at that they've all been given various awards, and again this manufacturing of poster children that the globalists do. So they take these low IQ activist morons, they make sure they're given a degree at some university, and they make sure they get publishing deals, they make sure they get awards for the best book ever, and these sort of things. This is all an engineer. This is all creating the activist poster children that the globalists want to put out front as this assault on white society. And so you look at the funding. So I spent a bit of time doing this. A number of the awards that are handed out, the businesses or the places that hand out these book awards, they're directly funded by George Soros. they don't even exist as real book. They don't even exist as real sort of literary judges of any sort. They're purely activist fronts. 100, in some cases, 100% paid for or primarily paid for by George Soros. Or you get other situations where, the United Nations pays a quarter of it, the George Soros pays a quarter, and then some other NGOs, the climate change or the whatever other NGOs who have charity status, by the way, so they're not supposed to be doing political activism, but they do on a grand scale, these NGOs. So these literary awards they get don't exist. So they've been passed through high school. They've been given gifted degrees just to create the poster child, gifted publishing deals, provided they pour out anti-white history and tell the most outrageous fucking lies about white people, and then they're given these awards and paid, and also given some of them are given quite generous grants to go and write a book. Now, given that the nonsense and the rubbish that they write, then that they're given, say, $200,000 reward to like a sort of a type of scholarship. They're given these to go off and write these outrageous pieces of propaganda. But I looked inside a number of these books, and again, lie after lie after lie after lie. It just goes on and on. And the terrible assertions that, like most men, he likes to grab women's genitals and he likes to oppress women. He is a misogynist, racist, Nazi, fascist, who is personal friends with Hitler. Ridiculous shit that these people are writing. And yet they're being not only published, which therefore the intent is to publish. This would never pass. The little things they picked me up on, again, very minor stuff, and I was grateful for it. These books, if they were going through any sort of rigor at all, they would be rejected out of hand, and the author would have to go back. So the intent has to be, we're going to create anti-white and promote and support and further anti-white propaganda. This is going to be all through the schools. These white kids never knew that all white people are Hitler. And so the intent is to do it. There's no pushback. Our politicians go along with it. Our educational institutions go along with it. As long as it's anti-white, nothing about that is the only requirement. History. It's got to be anti-white propaganda. That is the only purpose behind it. And there's a lot of money and effort being thrown at it. And as I go through these books again, you see all the activist NGOs, the Soroses, everything, their fingerprints all across it. And you see very low IQ manufactured authors that aren't authors assholes that are supposedly writing these books that somehow become bestsellers. Now, the bestseller thing, there was a very angry lesbian author here in Australia, and I noticed that the publishing company, some years ago, the publishing companies just published the books. That there was no, they just gave her the publishing deals. She became quite a well-known author amongst the glitterati anyway. And but I noticed that her books, I was talking to the sort of the managing editor of this publisher, and he very quiet. He sort of looked around to make sure there's nobody listening. We're having a coffee one day. Looked around, make sure nobody's listening, and then he decided that there was decided to tell me that in fact I think it was an NGO of some sort gave an advance order of 5,000 books of this woman, this angry lesbian author, gave an advance order of 5,000 books to so they could declare that on the opening week of the book being released that it was number one on the bestseller list. Now they paid for this, as I understand what he was saying was this NGO paid for the 5,000 books, so gave $50,000 or something or whatever it was to the publisher, and then but the publisher the books were never delivered. They didn't want them. Here's the money for the books. No, we don't want them. Well, what do you want us to do with them? Pulp them. Just pulp them and recycle them. Print other books. So they did that just so it would appear on the top of the bestseller list. But that same book, I remember seeing it on the discount bins. Say it was, I don't know, $15 or something on the shelf at the time. I remember seeing it for $2 on the book discount bins and the book discount shops. So even the initial small run, they weren't selling that. So nobody was buying these books. But this author was getting awards, was on the bestseller list, was heralded throughout the literary media coverage as being a great author and having being a fucking social justice genius and all this sort of stuff. When nothing of the sort was going on. So we need to also understand how manufactured the whole thing is and how fake it all is. These books are absolute rubbish. If it wasn't for the libraries and the schools all buying them, they probably wouldn't sell anything at all, because these books are utter crap. And from a historical or research rigor perspective, they're abysmal. I'd rate them as the work of a junior, an ordinary junior high school student. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.